welcome back to Lighthouse Ministries, where we tell our testimonies on how God led us from the darkness into the light. Today we will be discussing the fear of God.
Yes, so the fear of God is it's something that I have been learning about for a long time. It's one of those things that I have always kind of like wanted to go in detail of what it exactly meant. I've read it in the Bible, I've heard people say it a lot, but I didn't really get the true definition until it was recently revealed to me. So I just want to share with you guys what the fear of God means to us and our opinion and our testimony on having the fear of God put inside of us. So I do want to start by saying it doesn't mean like, how can I put it? It doesn't mean like just
The fear, like
I'm too scared to
scary
come to God.
movies.
No,
No.
no. The fear of God is like obeying God's commandments, obeying His, being in obedience, listening to God and His instructions and the things that He wants you to do, because you are amazed at God. You see God in awe. You know, it's a deep. See, when you truly get to know who God is, there's certain things that can put fear in you if you do commit a certain thing. Kind of like the Israelites in Exodus 20. I believe it's verse 18, starts at 18, and you can read that down. But after God had showed himself to the Israelites, it was on Mount Sinai, he appeared as this storm, and it was trumpets going off, and it was a lot of things. I'm actually about to read the passage for you guys, and then we can explain it after that. Now when all the people saw the thunder and the flashing of lightning and the sound of trumpet and the mountain smoke, and the people were afraid, and they trembled, and they stood far off and said to Moses, "You speak to us, and we will listen, but do not let God to speak to us, at least we die. Least we die." Moses said to the people, "Do not fear, for God have come to test you. The fear of him may be before you, that you may not sin." So God appeared and he showed them, and he also was telling them like these commandments that he wanted them to follow. He told them like his instructions for them, and the things that he wanted them to do. But they was like in so much fear that they was like, Moses, you talk to God for us because we're scared. And the fear was put in them so they can obey him, so they can listen to him, so they can follow him. It wasn't put into them so they can run away from God or things like that. But we have another perspective on that story. So before I get into the testimony, I'll explain that perspective. So really quickly, I just want to kind of say, like, we have been in some positions where, we have obeyed God and ended up in a storm. And we know that the storm is to sometimes build you up, is to test your faith, to test you, in a lot of ways that God have taught you, to see if you're going to run away from God or you're going to stay with God. Sometimes God will put you in such a terrible storm that, because he wants you to get closer to him as well. He allows certain things to happen. And it's kind of like in the scripture that we just read, it was kind of like this major storm, and it was fearful to them. And like they didn't know, like, it's things that they don't see every day. So they got to see God in a new way. And after he already have parted the sea for them and things like that, they have saw his miracles. But now they get to see him in a storming way. They get to see him in like more of a judgment way. If you read up from that passage, he was saying like, don't let anyone come and touch this mountain or you will die. And, they was in fear of God, but it wasn't the fear like, I don't want to serve God. It was more of like, I want to be in obedience. I want to listen to God. So how that relates to us is there are certain times where God will allow things to happen. And that God could have pulled you out of that easier, but he allowed it to go on for a certain amount of time to kind of show you like, you need to fully commit to me. So you need to fully give your life over to me. You need to fully, you know, get deeper and dial into what I'm telling you. I had a personal fear of God in my last season, which I've talked about before, but we had a really, really bad marriage season. So yeah, I'm just gonna give our testimony on our fear with God, and it's about a season where we was rebellion against God, and we got to a place of getting what we wanted, and we just totally act like children. We didn't listen. We didn't follow God the way that we should have. And I want you to kind of explain that season. I know we talked about it before, but yeah.
So this was our Airbnb season, the first time I can say. We was living in a hotel before that, and we did pray every night. It was times where we cried, and God eventually pulled us out of that season. So I was like, okay. So when he pulled us out, we began to go to Airbnbs. Our income was pretty decent.
Okay, wait, hold on. Let's give a little context before we get to that part. Okay, so I want to be open. I don't think she want to talk about it today, but to be real, we was bad. We was bad. We wasn't listening. Like I said, we had marital issues that we would not listen to. God would say, love each other, and we would look at each other like, no.
And fight each other.
She had heaviness on her heart towards sexual things. I had heaviness towards my heart towards arguing with her. We fought and kind of argued over everything. We was divided. God was telling us, to drop the childishness. Even in the Bible, I think it was in Proverbs, it was talking about, being childish and things like that. And we was just like, we're trying, but we just can't seem to get it together. And time after time after time, God was telling us to stop fighting, to stop arguing, to pay attention. And it seemed like, when you have bad children and you have to raise your voice for them to listen. Speaking from experience with our children, but God didn't raise his voice with us. He just continued to just tell us, you have to get it together. And I was scared. I'm not going to lie, because I was fearful that we was going to leave this season where we was making decent amount of money. We was living in nice places, and I was fearful that God was going to send us back to, living in this crappy hotel room. So I would try to talk to her, maybe we do need to get it together. And she kind of would be like, yeah, okay, but we couldn't do it. We just couldn't do it. We avoided it. We couldn't read our Bibles together towards the end. We couldn't pray together. It was just a fight for just our marriage at that point. So, yeah, it was being rebellion at that point. We just did not want to listen. We didn't want to get ourselves together. And so we ended up getting a blessing that we thought was a true blessing at that time. And God spoke to us and it was like, it's time for you to move to your apartment. And at this point, we was living in hotels and Airbnbs for almost a year. And we was like, finally, we can go to our apartment. And we thought that was just going to be the greatest moment. So I'll let you explain what happened at that apartment.
I feel like this is what God was putting fear into me.
Yeah. Well, both
so
of us.
Mostly me, because I was the most one that was going crazy then. So we get there. I'm thinking this is the promised land. This is where the place God is going to put us. So I'm happy, and I'm finally I'm going to get myself together now. Thinking I would do everything right. You know how we sometimes eventually get it together when God officially gives us something we want. So a couple weeks go by. We waiting on God. No job. No type of income coming in just yet. So we waiting. We're like, okay, God, we're going to wait on you on this time. But while we was waiting, God was giving us commandments and how to do this, how to do that all over again. Even though we already knew, but he was putting more in the understand for us to understand more. So as time went along, like, okay, God, we understand what you're doing, but are you going to help us pay this rent now? So I was just believing, hoping someone would come through, keep fighting. But it was hard there. I feel like we was in the wilderness all over again. Yeah. But in an apartment that we wanted, but not everything that was milk and honey there was not. So we just kept going, kept being grateful. We like, gotta come through when he's ready and when it's time. Days get shorter. We get an eviction. It's like your rent is due, it's past due, you owe this much. I'm like, God, it's getting shorter. What are we gonna do? And God is like, do what I told you to do. Treat each other right, love each other, and do your ministry. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So we kept going. We're like, okay, God, he gonna do it. Court date came. I had a meltdown. I'm sorry. I just don't like to be in the front light like that. I had a meltdown. God was showing me, no. This is a place where I need to show you who I am, of not listening to me into that last season that I put you in, and I gave you everything you prayed for, but you still didn't act right. So I was like, okay, we're gonna keep going. But God never paid our rent. God never said he was going to pay it. It sucks because you hear a lot of testimonies where people be like, God did this for me, and, well, he didn't do it for us this time because it wasn't our time. It was a lesson that we had to learn in that season.
Yeah, so it was, I just want to give a little backstory. We moved to this apartment. We realized it was a great apartment for us, but it was kind of like, it was a little peace there. Finally we didn't have to move from Airbnb to Airbnb. But we started to realize that the place started going down fast. There was a lot of problems with the apartment. Mm-hmm. And I just want to say, we live in Dallas, Texas, if you guys don't know. Mm-hmm. It get 110, 120, I don't know.
In the middle of the summer.
But it is hot. We couldn't afford an air conditioner. Mm-hmm. And the place had central air, but it didn't work. We will call the people and call them like, can you come fix the air? And he would give up the same excuse. Well, we can't fix it. So we was hot, okay? We got to a point where the job that she was once working and that we had, God was like, I'm slowing down the manna. So we said, okay, we can't push it. We're going to wait for God to open up another door for us. Mm-hmm. And we waited and waited and waited. He did open up that door at that season. And so we started going through, like, we was hungry at certain times. It kind of felt like
the wilderness,
living a life without God in it. Mm-hmm. It was like destruction in a certain way. Like, I cannot explain to you the nights where we cried, and we was like, okay, yeah, we got to get better. Yeah. So after going through this emotional season of ups and downs where we couldn't get our rent paid, we could barely get the food that we needed. It was hot. The apartment sucked. There's people calling our phones like, are you going to pay the rent? Are you going to pay the rent? And we just like, I don't have the money.
Couldn't give them.
And I started to remember the last season how crazy we were and how we didn't want to listen. And now we're like, okay, we are listening.
Yeah.
So after that, and then God didn't pay our rent. We had to leave there. We only stayed there for 2 months. We moved in an apartment and moved out in 2 months. Yeah. Got evicted in 2 months. It was crazy. So we realized that our rent was $1,700, by the way. And we was like, okay, we can make that easily. And couldn't make $1. But because everything that we was getting, God was giving it to us. But we was in so much disobedience that God had to install a certain amount of fear in us. And we had a fear of like being homeless. We had a fear of our children, going to a shelter, going through all these things. And it was fear. But God spoke to us again, like, now this time when you go back to this Airbnb season again, do it differently. Mm-hmm. Do not do it the same way that you did before. Yeah. And that installed true fear inside of us. So ever since that season, we have never looked at each other that way. We don't fight that way. When we start thinking about sinning against God or being rebellion against God or fighting against God, we immediately cut it out. We just like, okay, let's just close our mouth and hold hands or something. Like, we're not going back to that stage ever again because we don't want the punishment that comes behind it, So, yeah, we ended up actually, but we ended up getting to a point where God installed the fear inside of us. We said, no, we're not going back to who we used to be. We're going to be obedient. We're going to listen. We're going to let God, we're going to serve God in a different way. And so that is how God installed, the fear of God in us. And we saw God in a different way. A lot of times we think so many people like, oh, you're going to get all the blessings, you're going to get all the miracles and all the things like that. And that's true. You will get that once you give your life to Christ and you be obedient to him and his will for your life. But you have to remember, God will install a certain amount of fear in you. So like, I don't want to sin.
I don't want to go against God.
Like, because I know what God have already taught me and what he have brought me through, what he have told me. So I don't want to disrespect my wife, because I know, for one, my prayers won't get answered. That's in the Bible. You can look up that scripture if you want to. But there's so many things that I'm fearful of doing with this walk with Christ, not just because, I love God, and the more you love God and get closer to him,
the more you respect him.
The more you respect. So it's more of a fearful respect. I know that my disobedience will lead me to, getting removed from my promised land. Like, it was a guy in Joshua you probably already know the story, but it was a guy in the book of Joshua where he was being disobedient. God told them not to take anything from the land once you get to your promised land. He got there and took some from the land, and he was stoned to death, so him and his family. So I realized that, God is serious. So I had to be obedient. I had to listen. I had to stop the fighting and arguing. God placed that fear in me. It said in, I believe it's Jeremiah. You got the scripture right there, don't you? What is it?
Isaiah?
No, Jeremiah. Or is it?
No, it's Genesis 42:18 about not Jonah, but
No. It's about Joseph. Okay, I'll look up the scripture and add it up there later. But it's about Joseph. I know that he was talking to his brothers. I guess they didn't realize him, but he was saying how, like, you can trust me because I fear the Lord, so he's going to be okay. And there's certain times in the Bible where the fear of the Lord will keep you from sinning. It will keep you from going back to who you used to be. And God showed us that. He allowed this amazing storm in our life to actually to show us something. Like, it was a test. Yeah. And that season where we was getting evicted out and things like that, it felt like we was getting removed from our promised land. So we knew at that point that we cannot be the same people who we were, because we don't want to be removed from that promised land. So if you made it to the end of this video, I encourage you to read those chapters for yourself. Look into the Genesis part where Moses was telling them, don't fear God, but, and just think over your own life. Like, if you had a certain amount of fear in your life for God, would you still want to do the same thing? We was raised up in black households. So we're black households, but, when our parents say don't do something and you do it anyway, you're going to know better than to go back and do it again. So that is kind of what we went through, and like our testimony on how we fear the Lord. So every day now we walk in righteousness, we walk in truth and obedience to God, and we follow his commandments, because we don't never want to be on our own. The most scariest thing that we could ever face is God's presence walking away from us. So yeah, that's our testimony and our story about fearing the Lord. It's an amazing thing to actually fear the Lord and walk in fear of the Lord so you can stand his commandments. Sometimes, like, friends and people and family will try to pull you to the world side, but you like, I fear the Lord. If I go over there, what is God going to say? Is God going to walk away from my life? If he's going to punish me for that? God didn't bring me this far to leave me, but he also didn't bring me this far for me to leave him. Like Jonah, he told the story of Jonah in the Bible as well. I know you probably know that story, but Jonah was like, no, I'm finna go get on this boat, and I don't want to listen. I don't want to go there and do what you told me to do. And God caused a huge storm on the boat, and people on the boat was fearful. And Jonah said, I know what it is. It's because I didn't listen. And he was like, you got to throw me overboard. And people said, they hesitated at first, but they said, you know what, you got to go, because you're going to kill us all, and they tossed Jonah over the boat, and he actually got eaten by a fish, right? And inside of the fish's belly, he stayed for 3 days until he got it in his mind to stop being rebellious against God. And God caused that storm to hit that boat. He caused that fish, and after that, Jonah had the fear of God. He said, what, I'm about to go and do what God told me to do. I may not like it, I may not want to, but I will walk in obedience with God. So that's kind of our story of fear of God, and I know that you guys have that story as well, but you can go ahead and finish.
All right, you guys. Thank you guys for watching our video. I hope this encouraged you to stop going against God and do what he told you to do. Because if you keep going against it, you're going to keep doing that cycle. And that cycle is not fun. So I ask you guys to have the fear of the Lord and give him respect that he deserves. And actually leave a comment of how God could have feared you and how he could have shown you to respect him more in a way of out of love. Remember, this is out of love. This is not out of fear. This is for love, for you to get together and for you to become better and prosper. So make sure you leave a comment. Make sure you follow our YouTube channel. And we'll see you guys later.
See you later.